Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Coroner. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, that opening, I was kind of curious, where we're going to start with this, but then we see, obviously, it's Gideon's body and his wife having to see him like that, and it just, I don't know, that immediately made me think, is that easier? I mean, the situation sucks. There's no easier in it, but it's still you don't even get to see the person you love. You don't get to see their face. You see their bones and seeing the bullet wound in his. It's just a lot, and I don't know. Obviously Jenny didn't want to initially, but it's still kind of she has every right to see him and be able to say goodbye and be able to see him one last time. So it's there's that. Give her some form of closure, but regardless. The fact of the matter is, obviously, this case ends up escalating because obviously for Jenny, she's trying to contact Amanda, but Amanda won't answer. So obviously she's getting more and more worried. Then a body shows up, and then it's a situation where that body, obviously for Jenny, she's worried, she's scared, but then it turns out it's not Amanda. But then eventually they end up, looking at the body, and it's she's frozen solid or whatever, and I was wait, the body that was... Because I was under the assumption, the body that was in the freezer was Gideon's, that maybe he had been in there for a while. That's why the cops couldn't find him when they were looking for him type of thing. But it turns out this lady in particular is actually Dylan's mom. Because there's a death certificate for his dad, but not his mom, even though he said his mom died last year. So it's so she's the one that was scratching. Even the symbols... obviously they translated it, and it's it basically roughly translates to Dylan. So it's okay. And then we finally do catch up with Amanda, and she's still with Dylan and him. And I guess because you already Storm already kind of rubbed you the wrong way, but I guess for her it's kind of a thing of you're young, you're in love, Dylan makes you feel okay. Obviously it's you found someone when in a vulnerable time, because she had lost her parents or one of her parents previously around the same time Dylan did, so there's something more to that, which is even more messed up when you think about the fact is obviously she legitimately lost her family. Dylan killed his, and that's the whole thing. But obviously it's the moment he's oh, here's this diamond ring for you and everything, and you're okay. I was the moment that showed up, I was you killed someone for that. I was that makes, but and then Dylan's but then Storm is putting on the mask and everything, and he's got something in his bag or whatever that's covered in blood or whatever, and he zips it up. So you're just kind of once again, she's so in love and just thinking oh, Dylan loves me, he cares for me. I'm surprised this situation ended up being what it is, because once again, I thought Randall or Storm would have been more about oh, we need to kill her. But in actuality, because Dylan cares about her so much that he's oh yeah, no, I want her, don't hurt her, anything. Because I like how they handle this, because they make it seem Storm's the one that's more in control, that Dylan's the one that's kind of alone for the ride. But as the investigation goes on and on, you kind of realize no, in actuality, Dylan is the one that's kind of completely in control. Because when you look at the scene, because you end up finding out oh yeah, the people that were murdered, that ring came from Randall's parents. His mom and dad were murdered. His mom's fingers were sliced off and everything. So you're okay, so the ring came from her and everything. But they talked about it the one for Randall's dad, those wounds were a little more shallow. The ones that went after Randall's mom, those wounds are a lot more deeper and severe and more rage-filled. So you're so the assumption is Randall killed his dad, Dylan killed his mom, especially considering the ring and everything. I'm sure so it kind of shows you where they both are. I mean, granted, they're both psychopaths, they're both killers, but it just shows you Dylan is kind of on a whole other level, because obviously this also deals with that book from last episode too, because even Ross is kind of finding it fascinating, and he's oh yeah, the dude who wrote his tweet, man, I was you don't, it's what, I was the moment that storyline came up, I was oh, that's not going to be good, that's not going to be good, and then obviously slowly but surely over the course of the episode, Amanda started seeing the more drastic side to them. The fact of the matter is, at one point they're trying, because they're, Dylan's oh, let's go to Australia, let's go, we can get away, and no, Randall, he's cool, it's fine, but, so I was a little nervous, I was what's that, because at the beginning, because that's the whole thing about the last episode, I kept wondering, what is their whole deal? I couldn't understand like what this was all about. It just seemed so out there, and it's like, and now this episode kind of encapsulates everything, being like, oh, the reason why it feels kind of random is because it kind of is. These guys went on a spree because at the same time, because you're wondering like, okay, what's this about? Like, are they like, that's what I was wondering, because obviously like Gideon's wife was saying like, oh, maybe this has something to do with his work, and now it seemed like, how do they correlate in any shape or form between William and Gideon? They were close people, because for Randall it's like, oh, like Gideon was his teacher, William, it's like, oh, Dylan gave him like his computer to check, so like that's the only connection. So it's like, oh, these are people we kind of know, let's use them as like, targets. And so obviously it started with William, and eventually they got to Gideon at some point. Like it was much later on down the road, because Dylan's the one that most likely dealt with William, and then eventually he met up with Randall and kind of convinced Randall like, oh, let's do this thing. It's like two psychopaths who met each other, because there was like, I think like, was it like internet posts, forum posts, back and forth, and then it was eventually about like, oh, how to kill people and stuff like that. So kind of showing you immediately, I mean later on, just how off the rails they are, because eventually it's like they were trying to get away because traffic was backed up and everything, and this dude was in his car and they were honking at him, and the dude just like flipped them off. They just snapped and pulled out machetes and sliced him up, and it's like kind of showing you like how completely out there they are. And obviously this situation is getting worse, because like obviously more bodies are dropping, and obviously for Jenny, she's scared because it's like, Amanda could be next, and she's worried about her. And obviously there's that moment she's like hyperventilating rather than taking her pills, which I think people hyperventilating or just kind of having panic attacks, almost like someone breathing like that. I don't know if anyone else experiences that. When me watching that, it kind of made me kind of effed with my breathing a little bit. It made me uncomfortable. So like, but it's just like, maybe that's just like a natural human reaction, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, like, she chose not to take her pill because I guess she didn't want to be too reliant on it. I guess she felt like maybe her pills, like, they help, sure, but I don't think for her it's like, no, I need to kind of do this on my own. Like, I guess she doesn't want to be so reliant on her pills because she has to, kind of take them often. They kind of, like, calm her nerves and everything, kind of calm her panic attacks. But, obviously, it, they caught a couple, like, breaks in the case, because like obviously Amanda like took that photo with that girl at the convenience store, and part of me kept wondering like, why wasn't she answering Jenny's phone? But I guess for her it's like, no, I'm with Dylan, and it's just like Jenny's just gonna be worried, but I'm okay. I don't want her to worry about me, which is like, obviously she's blowing up your phone, so obviously she is worried. But it's probably like Dylan was like, nah, you don't have to answer her. She's probably, you don't worry about it. We gotta go. You love me, right? Type of thing of like, you do anything for me. Right? I think it's kind of that type of situation. What was it? Taylor and McAvoy went to like Randall's place at one point in the episode. I thought was interesting. Like, and like he has all like, well, I forget whether that was Randall or Dylan's dorm. I can't remember whose it was, but basically there was all those books and stuff like that. So it might have actually been, I can't remember, it might have been Dylan's, but I think they said it was Randall's. But regardless, the fact of the matter is the room was filled with all these like crazy books and stuff that he's reading, and then also he has like a dartboard above his head, and McAvoy's basically like, oh, he plays dart roulette, that basically throws a dart up, and if it fails, it'll come and hit him. He wants to kind of feel pain and stuff like that, because the pillow even has blood on it and stuff like. It's like, once again, showing you the extremes of this whole situation. Then the episode got really panic-inducing when Dylan just showed up because he followed, where Ross was, because Ross had geotagged like his tweets or whatever, and so it's just like him being there, and he's like, "Yo, you didn't tweet me back." Almost like, "Oh, I thought we were kind of kindred spirits or whatever." It's like, whatever. Fact of the matter is, I'm here for my book. He's like, "Dude, I don't have your book." It's like, "Who has it?" My mom does. It's like, "Why would your mom have my book?" It's like, "She's the coroner." He's like, "Oh, I met her. She's pretty smart." "Oh, is she in the house?" And he's like, "No, she's at work." He's like, "Oh, so you're here alone?" I'm like, "Oh, shit." But luckily Liam was there and kind of tackled him. It's like, okay, luckily Liam's got some training, so like neither him or Ross really got too banged up from the situation. Obviously that's got to be the scariest thing for her, Jenny, because obviously she, she was so relieved because she went to, him, hugged Ross, and it's like, you can't die on me. You are not allowed to die. He's like, I know, Mom, because it's like, obviously it's like, she's still dealing with everything from, her husband and everything. And if, obviously like, Ross is her world, and, it's just like, that's gotta be a scary moment. And obviously she's kind of blaming herself because she's like, Liam, I'm sorry I put you in danger. She's like, no, you didn't. She's like, yeah, I did, because she also blames herself because she's like, we kind of escalated the situation because it's like Dylan and Randall wouldn't have gone. They ended up obviously killing Randall's parents after. It's like if we had never visited Dylan, maybe none of this would have happened, but obviously, McAvoy is like, well, you'd have to take me back in time and show me that all things would be different. It's like, eventually they would have done this anyway. It's just, but I think the thing is like, we escalated them, and obviously it's like, she's even more nerve-wracked because this whole situation is going to escalate them more, because obviously, because of Ross tweeting the tweets from Dylan, they were able to kind of, get his number, and so they plan on calling him to kind of get a location. But obviously Jenny's reluctant because like, if you do that, you put Amanda in danger, and it's like, if Amanda's seen as kind of an obstacle, an issue, like, oh, she's against us, then we'll kill her. That's the only reason why she's been able to survive now, because in Dylan's mind it's like, oh yeah, it makes you wonder, does he even really love her? But at the very least, he maybe looks at her as like, hey, she does whatever I want her to. Like, she's there for me. So it's kind of that, regardless of it all. But they do call, luckily, Amanda's the one that picks up. And Jenny's able to kind of calm her down and talk to her. Obviously, Dylan and Randall come after her. Because, like, it turns out, like, the whole plan isn't just like, oh, we're going to hit the airport and escape. It's like, apparently from his book, the whole point is like to basically kill the entire party. So that only the hero survives. So maybe it's like, Dylan will survive, but obviously Amanda and Randall won't. Like, for him, it's just like, because it's some weird, crazy story about the end of days and stuff like that. He's just like, the kid's out of his mind, obviously. So it's like, luckily the cops got there in time. They got Randall, and Randall was dead. Dylan gets arrested. Jenny's obviously, she doesn't care about all that. She's looking for Amanda. She runs towards the lights and stuff like that, finds Amanda up Friday. I was like, no. I was like, after everything, I was like, dude, I was like, I was like, don't do that. Please don't. But luckily, Amanda opens her eyes. I was like, oh, Jesus. I was like, thank you that it worked out like that. But obviously a big part of this episode, too, is the very ending where it's like, it's that thing of like, obviously I think a lot of news outlets, I don't know, I try not to watch news as much, but obviously that's typically a thing of like, don't announce who the people are because you don't want them to get recognition, because obviously they did this for some recognition. So it's like, you don't let them, names be known. But obviously for Jenny, it's like, my job is to speak for the dead. I'm not going to speak on behalf of these, letting their names be out there. It's like, no, let's focus on the victims. Because it's actually interesting because, like, Donovan finally asked her, like, what her little prayers were that she was saying to them. It's like, she's basically saying, like, telling them, I see you. Like, I think that's her way of being like, don't worry, I got you. Like, I see you. I will do my best for you. Like, I know your name. I know who you. I think it's that kind of attachment. So it's not like, oh, you're just some nameless person. Like, I know you. I see you, and I will do my best to kind of represent you, because she herself said it. She speaks for the dead, and obviously she had talked about it with the head Emmy or whatever, because he talked about the fact that it mattered, because Jenny had previously brought it up, and she brings it up in this episode, that she wants to open up all of Peterson's cases. And obviously he was like, think long and hard about what you're going to do. And she basically at that conference basically was like, or in front of all those news outlets, was basically like, I'm opening up every case, because she's like, basically this department failed because they didn't correlate the whole, because Peterson just did Williams' case, whatever it was. It's kind of, that's whatever. If they had handled that differently back then, none of this would have happened. It's like, because I'm sure even parts of this investigation is like, because this all started because Peterson didn't handle the William case the way he should have. He just kind of lumped it off as just, oh, it was obviously this. It's like, I don't know whether it was hubris on his own part, being like, oh, I know what I'm doing, or, was he so kind of got his own God complex, thinking like, no, I know what's going on. I'm really good at my job, and obviously it's this. Is it because he just didn't want to bother looking any deeper because it would have cost more, or just more time, or just that he really just, he just that incompetent in his job, So it's obviously that whole thing. And obviously, what's his name, Brian, I think he's the head enemy dude, was kind of like, oh, you didn't even walk this past me. She's like, yo, we had that whole conversation about E4, basically think about the long game, about like what the ramifications, like basically what the ripple effects are going to be for this. Obviously, McAvoy's not happy, because for him, it's like, you are basically unearthing 10 years worth of cases. He's like, my work, and for her, it's like the most important thing. He's like, yes, I get it. You want to go for the truth and everything, but he's like, what about the zombies that are basically going to come up because of this? There's going to be so many lawyers being like, oh, my client's case was dealt by Peterson, like there's going to be a lot of people let off, and she's basically like, whatever zombies come, we'll deal with it, which I think is just, it's a complicated thing, because you understand where this all comes from, where this all stems from, because you can understand where McAvoy's coming from, because like there's a lot of guilty parties that are, in jail right now, that it's like, because of you, this is going to complicate so much. You're going to, do away with a lot of good work, my work. But at the same time, it's like, yes, there's going to be guilty parties involved, but what about the innocent people where the story wasn't fully represented because Peterson didn't go about it? So it's a complicated thing where you can see where Donovan's coming from, but at the same time, it's like you understand where Jenny's coming from, because this situation escalated to the point it didn't need to. Like, it was just like I said, there were fumbles a little bit during the case, because obviously it's like everything with Amanda, the whole situation with it's like, once again, Jenny saying like, if we hadn't visited Dylan, maybe things wouldn't have escalated either. But obviously, once again, it stems mainly from Peterson's incompetence. So it's like, plus like her son almost could have been killed in this situation, and obviously it's like what happened with Amanda. So it's a thing of like, all the victims, this is her way to speak for them, because it's like, because this wasn't handled, so many innocent people were killed in this spree and everything. So you kind of lean a little more towards Jenny, but at the same time, like I said, you can understand where Donovan's coming from. But you almost want to demonize Donovan, because it's like, the way you make it seem like, oh, my good work, it's like, hold up, like I get you made it in general, because I think for him it's like, you opening up all those cases is going to make it make me look bad, because it's going to make it seem like, oh, I didn't do my job, when I did do my job based on the evidence that was there. But now it's going to make it seem like, oh, there was a lot of stuff that was left on the table I didn't really do my due diligence on, so it's going to make him look incompetent. So I get that, but once again, it's like, you're making it about you, but you could also make the same argument Jenny's doing the same thing, but once because she kind of personalizes with the dead, she's like, I need to speak for you and to get justice for these people, as well as like the other people that might not have gotten the truth out there. And so so I'm curious to see what this does to her and Donovan's partnership going forward. I'm sure it's going to complicate things, especially her relationship with the cops in general, not just Donovan. All the cops are going to look at her like Taylor and everyone else. It's going to probably look at her like, for real, like you like making their lives difficult. So it's probably that might be an issue in the next episode, where like cops are looking at her kind of a weird way, like, it's you, so I'm interested to see them kind of dive into that. But obviously, it's like for her, Jenny, it's like, Ross hit her up, and it's like, hey, like, I saw you on TV, and she's like, yeah, a lot of people hate me right now. He's like, but that's your superpower. You don't care what people think. And when it's all said and done, we also see him with Mateo, and I think that's nice. I think it's because obviously, like, I think coming face to face with a situation like that kind of put things in perspective for him. Maybe, like, life is short. Like, obviously he already knows that, but obviously he was still dealing with, he was just pushing people away because of everything with his dad. But I think that kind of scared him into being like, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to just kind of push away. You obviously love me. You care about me. So I think it's kind of neat to see. Just the fact is that, they're still together and everything. And obviously it means a lot for Jenny, because Jenny wants Ross to have someone to care about him, someone else to also care about him and look out for him and be there for him, when maybe she isn't always able to, so. And we see her go out with Liam later on, so maybe finally taking some steps forward, kind of, and just obviously with everything that's going on, and I think it's probably, probably trying to figure out what their situation is going to be going forward. What was also an interesting reveal is, like, obviously Ross goes through some of his mom's stuff, and there's a photo of her with her sister, and he's like, my mom's sister died, but mom doesn't really talk about it. But then we see the dog in the background, so it's like, we don't know if Jeannie recognizes the dog, because she's never brought it up, at least from what we've seen of her therapy session, she's never brought up the fact that it's a dog that she knows. But it's like, that picture was taken when she was a little girl, so she might not remember. So obviously it shows that this isn't just some random doll. Her mind is her subconscious might be trying to tell her something, you know? The fact is her sister died and she doesn't talk about it. I mean, maybe that also has something to do with, when David died, like why it hit her and why it messed her up. It's not the first tragedy that's kind of struck her. Part of me wonders, is it like a murder situation, like her sister was murdered, or is it just kind of like random, maybe that's why she got in the medical field in the first place, was because of her sister, and now even more so, like, obviously she shifted careers again because, David died. So it's like, I'm curious to find out more about that storyline, because we didn't see the dog pop up this episode, but I am curious in the long run to see, what, like I said, it just seems like her, especially because it was like, wait, she tries to go towards the dog, and she's like, well, it's scared of me, and once again, like, what that represents. I mean, maybe that in particular is why she was scared to take the pill, because maybe she was afraid, if I take the pill, like, maybe she was hoping to see the dog again or something. Maybe, I don't know. I'm curious in the long run to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.